I think we don't have to do the talk tonight because
I just spoil
what you read really sums it up. Do what you can. Always try, right? And that's what we're going to study tonight. This book is fascinating. If you haven't read it, I think we've got one in the library. I think you probably get one. I think the PDF version is free online. I've been starting this book every morning, a few pages, and I haven't finished it completely, but it tells the stories of spiritist workers assisting spirits that have passed that are going to reincarnate. Their challenges they're facing, the assistance, the reasons why it's taken them so long, the drama that carried over. So I look forward to sharing some of those stories with you. Chico Xavier is the medium. Andre Luis is the spirit. And this book, sorry, where's my clicker? This book was written in 1946, and it's part of a series that Andre Luis and Chico Xavier brought to us, starting with Na Solar. This is the fourth book in the series. Na Solar is the first book that I ever read about Spiritism. My wife, then a woman that I met that I wanted to get to know better, gave me our first conversation. We talked about our beliefs and God and Jesus, and I just described what I believed, and she said, "You're a Spiritist." I say whatever you want to call me, just call me, right? I didn't know what Spiritism was, but she gave me a copy of Na Solar and a copy of the Spirits book, and I haven't stopped reading them. It's been 21 years. It's amazing how all of this stuff I have affinity for, and it just makes sense to me. But this is the series. They wrote 13 books over a 24-year period, and we're going to talk about the fourth one in the series, which is Workers of the Life Eternal. Andre Luis was a physician in his physical life, in his last physical life. Well-to-do, educated, status in the community, but he struggled like most of us as a spirit in a physical body. Even though he had accomplishments, he led a life marked by negligence to some degree, pride, ego. In some of these books, they actually talk about, I think it was actually, my apologies, Na Solar, they when he first passes and comes to and the other side, he's tagged or classified as a suicide, and he's shocked. So what do you mean? I didn't kill myself, right? Am I getting this right? Okay, whew, good. I'm glad you're fact checking me. This is good. And what the point was in that book, in that particular portion, is he did contribute to his own demise in the way he lived. Right? He didn't eat well. He didn't take care of himself. He was more tied to materialism and things pleasing to his senses as opposed to his spirit. And that was, all playing into his vanity. When he died, he found himself in a very dark, painful spiritual region, what is frequently called the lower zone or the umbral. He spent a lot of time there, did get assistance, and now we find through the process of these books as we progress, especially in the first one, he's at this point where he has this self-discovery. He actually is rescued by spiritual workers. They take him to Na Solar, which is a spiritual colony, and there he begins to understand those universal laws, those spiritual laws that govern not just his life, but all of our lives. And he begins working towards his regeneration. And the big message for him that gets him through this, or gets him moving and buying into it, if you will, is he realizes that redemption is through service. He eventually becomes a dedicated student. Then he becomes a servant. And the book that we're talking about tonight, he actually is partaking. He's on expeditions, if you will. He's leaving Na Solar, going into these lower zones and assisting these individuals with their their process of reincarnating or getting to that point. As we look at the whole series of 13 books, I'm not going to read all of these to you, but there's some pretty cool stuff in there. But each one of the books in this series that they wrote has a specific theme. If you look at number 4, we're going to talk about spirit teams assisting folks that are discarnated, that are just kind of stuck. There's a few different examples that we'll go into. But as you look at this list, just about every topic is covered. And the reason I like these books, well, I shouldn't say the reason, but one of the reasons I like these books so much is it reads like a novel, a story, you know. It really captures your imagination, your emotions, and it's told in a way. I always feel like I'm in the moment when I read these books. Unlike when I read stuff from Joanna DeAngelis, which, don't get me wrong, it's good stuff, but when I read books that she's presented, I almost feel like I'm back in graduate school, right? Because it's really hard stuff. I have to read the page 4 times and still don't get it all. But these books, I call them a page turner. If I had more time, I'd finish them in one sitting, you know? So let's jump in to Workers of the Life Eternal. The main concept here is they explore key teachings and spiritual insights for our journey beyond the grave. Because obviously, as we know, life doesn't end when this body ends, right? It continues. Our spirit is eternal. And it's not like we die and everything's great, right? We don't automatically progress, right? We take with us our character, our flaws, our experiences, but you know, we lose our shirt, we lose our wallet, we lose all our material things, but we're exactly where we are morally with death. And the whole idea, for me, the way I perceive this, is what can I do today and each day that I'm alive in this body to prepare myself for that day I die. We'll talk more about this, but the way we live really impacts the way we die and carry on. So let's jump in. In this book, there's a couple quotes from the book, and it's all about preparing for the afterlife. What's he tell us here? Death does not extinguish friendly cooperation, mutual aid, comforting intercession, or evolutionary service. The vibratory dimensions of the universe are infinite as the worlds that populate the immensity of space. No one dies. Far and wide, the quest for perfection continues. I like that first sentence, right? Death does not extinguish friendly cooperation. We are surrounded by spirits that we have affinity with. The better we're living, the more morally we're living, the more we're surrounded by elevated energy. The less we are living that way, the more we're surrounded or attracting negative energy. And this just reminds me that the better I live, the better I try, the better I expose myself to good things, the more I'm surrounded by friendly cooperation. It goes on to say, life sprouts anew. It purifies and uplifts its multiple teams of servants, leading them in radiant triumph to supreme union with divinity. The teams piece is important because the book that we're talking about tonight, if you can imagine, it's a team of spirits. There's an expedition leader, if you will, and there's different spirits, part of this team, all coming together to work together to help individuals in that discarnation process to make the trip back, if you will. I guess the point is we're not alone, right? How many of you ever felt alone? I know I have, right? God, where are you? Or why is this happening to me, right? The point is we may feel alone, but we're never alone. We are surrounded by the energy we draw to ourselves. We're going to talk more about this tonight. We'll talk about some examples of different situations that were created simply by those ties to that energy. So the mission, right, the purpose of the mission for this team that was leaving Nasular and going to the lower zones was to prepare and support selected spirits for their transition, right? Their job is to assess the readiness based on the moral and emotional and spiritual development of the individuals that they're helping. And the key point is not every spirit is going to receive this spiritual escort. We could talk for hours on the various interpretations or thoughts on what happens when we die and how we're greeted or what we come into, what we encounter. This specific passage, though, is about that escort that we're studying in this book. And essentially, what they tell us here is that the spiritual teams are assigned to those that have lived morally well. Obviously, if we're living on Earth and we've died, we're obviously still what's the word? A lower level spirit, right? We're on that whole graph. I always put that graph in my talks, and I didn't do it tonight. But if we look at this graph, we're created simple and ignorant initially, and we elevate life after life to ultimately becoming a pure spirit. If we passed on Earth, if we lived on Earth, we're definitely in that lower quadrant, where we're more tied to physical and material pleasures as opposed to love and things pleasing to the spirit. That doesn't mean that we haven't lived ethically or humbly, right? We can all think of examples of people right here in the center. I can think of one individual. I won't name names and embarrass her, but or call attention to her. But every time I run into this woman, she's helping. Whether she's feeding the homeless, singing at the caravan, or helping with the kids, right? No ego, no pride. I never witnessed it. Just giver. Now, she's human, just like us. She has her challenges, I'm sure. But when she passes, I would probably bet the farm that she's going to have a team helping her, right? Because she's just drawing this energy to her all the time. If we think about the guy I was 30 years ago, a long time ago, I probably don't think I would have deserved that team. I'm hoping now I'm living better, so hopefully I'll have the team now. But the way I lived before compared to the way I'm living now, it has a lot to do with this energy that I'm going to attract to me. The other question or the other stipulation here is, has the person or the spirit lived, have they pursued inner reform and spiritual study? How much time do we devote to our transformation, our spiritual development? How many have seen that slide I use sometimes? 1 hour is what? 4% of our day. So I go to the gym for an hour, right? I do that pretty regularly. 4%, 1 hour, right? How much time do you think I spend praying and studying? Not 4%, right? Sometimes it's 0.001, but I'm getting more and more into the habit. So my day starts now, almost every day without fail. I'll read whatever book I'm reading. So right now it's this book. I'll read a few pages. A devotional like this, right? Happy Life. I think the one I'm reading now is Pills of Trust, I think it's called. And then I have a couple daily devotionals, just little one-page type of things. And I don't think I'm getting to that hour, but it definitely starts me off right. And I'm convinced that if I can just keep doing that day after day, little by little, I'm going to spend a lot more time, and I'm going to draw positive energy towards me. And I'm pretty sure I'm living better. Still messing up every day. Don't get me wrong. I feel like a hypocrite up here sometimes, right? But I am living better today than I did previously, and a big part of that is I'm devoting time every day to trying to reform and study my spiritual development. The other piece that's real important to receive this team, this assistance, are they ready and consciously ready for the transition? Right? You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make the horse drink, right? So if the spirit doesn't want to change, if they want to stay in that energy that they're in, there's not much you can do. They can be aided by prayer, right? They can be aided by faith and detachment from the energy, but they've got to consciously make the effort. They've got to try. They have free will, and they can choose to stay stuck in the mud, if you will, or be ready for the transition. And when they are, there's help there. And then the last one here is, have they earned spiritual merit, not through religious label, but by love and action? When I was a kid, I spent a lot of time in a church. I was an altar boy. I went to catechism. I actually thought I wanted to be a priest until I kissed a girl, but we won't talk about that. But, to the age of 15, I thought I was going to be a priest. And part of my part of my not dislike, but part of my reasoning for leaving that organized faith was being so involved on a regular basis. It became more of a show. It became more of a ritual. It became more of we believe this because, or we do this. We've always done it this way, right? And that's what this last sentence reminds me of, right? That spiritual merit, not through religious label or religious practice, but by love and action, by the way Christ lived, by the example he set for us, right? I'm studying. There's a Bible study that I do with a couple friends. It's an app called Through the Word. You listen to a chapter, and you can leave 3-minute recordings about your thoughts on the chapter. And right now we're in the middle of Matthew. I think we did Matthew 16 today. And it was all about the last couple of chapters or chapters in the book of Matthew are all about his calling out of the Pharisees and the religious and political leaders of the time, where he was, Christ was accused of being a heretic or a hypocrite, if you will, or breaking the laws of the times. And in Matthew, it's very clear how he calls out that, hey, these are man-made laws. These are man-made ideas of perfection. So it's not about the religious label. And that's another beauty, I think, of Spiritism. We don't really have any rituals or ceremonies or uniforms or what have you. You come as you are. No one asks you to convert. No one says you got to do it this way or that way. We just ask that you love, right? Just come as you are, love each other, and be respectful. And it's very powerful, that last sentence for me. All right. I think I beat that pretty good, right? Go on. So this team, right, that is helping, there are spirits that aren't going to receive that. And these are the folks that have lived selfishly, that have ignored spiritual laws. That doesn't mean they're condemned, right? There isn't this fiery pit where they're going to spend eternity. But they've chosen to be stuck in this selfish situation. They've ignored spiritual laws. They've died with heavy attachments or resentments. My wife and I were talking recently about a relative, one on her side of the family, one on my side of the family. She just visited her family in Brazil, and she left Brazil. She went there knowing that she may not see this person again. She's getting older. She's ill. But she came home very much at peace. Like, I'm not worried about her. She's in a good place. She's connected to God. She's living right. She's at peace with. She doesn't have any enemies. Right. She's made all of her amends. And then we were talking about one of my family members, who's not quite, still kind of hung up with grudges and animosity and bitterness. So if you take these, and individuals aside, if you just take those two situations, right, regardless of the family or whatever, the person that is at peace and tranquil and accepting of all these things is going to have a much better transition than the person that's holding on to heavy attachments or resentments. Because what happens in that situation? We have all this negativity drawn to us, weighing us down, and it takes a lot to release that. They resist help and remain vibrantly closed. We'll talk about a spirit a little bit later that went through this. And again, it points out, right, the spiritual assistance is always available, right? But our readiness, our humility, and merit determine when and how it teaches us or reaches us. So I guess I'll just ask a question. You don't have to answer it, but think about it. If you were to end this life today, what's it going to be like? Are you at peace with yourself? Are you at peace with your Creator? Have you made amends with those that maybe you owe an amends to? Are you mad at anybody? And I'm not suggesting you go out tonight and call everybody and say I'm sorry, but where are we in this? Are we holding on to that weight of resentment and grudges? Because that's going to impact our transition. All right, so let's talk about one of the characters in the book here. Demas. Is that how you say it? Demas or Dimas? How would you say it in Portuguese? Demas? Okay. My Portuguese is pretty good. I'm getting there. 21 years.
If it's not.
All right. So this character, or this spirit, right, was a devoted spiritist, a worker like many of you that are sitting in this room. He was a father. He had a family. He lived a very modest and ethical life. He was devoted to service, faith, very humble, lived with humility, and didn't have many resources materially, but he was rich in spiritual credit. He earned those credits through years of moral conduct. He lived a life of forgiveness. He lived a life of charity. And the end of his life, and they didn't mention his age, but based on the description, I would probably say he was somewhere in his mid to late 60s, not too much older than me. And he came down with a terminal disease. It doesn't say what the disease was, but it was terminal. To the end, he was peaceful, right? He had resigned to God's will. This was his lot. This was his life. This was what was going to happen. And because he was resigned to God's will and he had this inner peace, the detachment of his life was very smooth, very peaceful. That being said, he also received assistance from this team, and much different story for him than some of the other folks that we're going to talk about. And the lessons I think we can learn from this particular spirit in this book is, remember, I said he lived a lifetime, right, of humility, right? And that's the key points here. Our spiritual merit isn't defined by one action, right? Our spiritual merit, our character, our morality, it all develops slowly. This gentleman, like us, was definitely not perfect, right? He had his flaws, but his daily efforts made a difference. He woke up every morning and tried. He intentionally tried to do good every day, and that really makes a difference. It also points out that our service matters more than our status. You can be the most well-known guy in the world, have all kinds of degrees and status and money, and not be a really nice guy. You can be super nobody, right? Nobody knows you, right? But at every opportunity, you help others anonymously, right? You live simply, and that was him, right? His soul shined brightly due to his sincere service to others. The other takeaway from his story was that prayer creates bridges. Remember, we are never alone. We've said that a couple times tonight. In his physical life, he had a loving family that were similar in beliefs to him. They prayed together. They did charity together. But he was also surrounded, right, like we are right now, right, from the spiritual side, with spirits of like-mindedness that had affinity to the things that were important to him. So those bridges of prayers, right, he had assistance not only from his material family, right, his mortal family, but also from the spiritist community from the other side. He had no attachments to physical material things, and his illness did not make him cling to life in the sense that I don't want to die, I don't want to die, I don't want to die. Don't take me, don't take me, don't take me. He was accepting of it, right? So that peaceful, that tranquility really assisted with a smooth transition. I'm not suggesting that you guys should just be happy and ready to die. That's not what I'm saying. But as we embrace these things, as our time comes, if we're not fighting it, if we have faith, if we believe in better things to come, if you will, or the transition, it's going to make it easier. But don't get me wrong, I don't want to die tonight. All right, I'm not rooting for that. But when my time comes, I hope I can be like Demas and embrace, if you will. And then finally, from Demas, we learned that spiritual assistance is earned. Right, his peaceful discarnation was not a privilege, right, but a natural result of his vibrational alignment with the divine law. He wasn't special, right? He wasn't favored by God. He just lived a consistent life, like everybody. He made choices, and his choices got him to where he had earned that peaceful transition. Does that make sense, or no? Yeah, good. All right, now let's flip this and go in another direction. Luciana and Amaro. A story of attachment, regret, and healing. So Luciana was Amaro's wife. She died young. She passed away prematurely, as it says here. She stayed attached to Amaro, and Amaro stayed attached to her in the sense that he didn't move on. He was sad. He was in despair. He basically created an emotional and spiritual unbalanced existence. So much so that his attachment to her kept her attached to him, and they were kind of still united. Neither one of them were able to move forward in the spiritual realm. And that attachment prevented them from progressing spiritually. And this contributed, obviously, to his instability. Just that, what do we call it? That obsession? Yeah? Just mired, I should say, in heaviness and sadness. Hard to get out of, obviously. So this team obviously is going to help. The husband, Amaro, right, he's a widower. He's still grieving her death years later. It's excessive, it's self-consuming, and they describe it here as an obsessive attachment. And although he's a decent man, his sorrow has led to this spiritual stagnation. So because he lived somewhat of a ethical life, right? He wasn't a bad guy. He just was caught up in sadness and loss. He was one of the folks that had this team waiting for him. They went to help him. And the intervention goes like this, okay? The spiritual team intervenes, and they kind of, it's hard to explain, but think about separating people without separating them, right? She's a spirit, he's a spirit in a physical body, kind of tied together, right? Just really attached. So part of the team helps separate her. The other part of the team helps lift him up. And over a period of time, Amaro finally is able to make that switch where he wants to move on. He wants to get better. And the spiritual team is able to release those chains that are holding him to this, which does a couple of things. It frees him to start living better, right? To get out of that cycle of sadness and negativity. And it frees Luciana to move forward with her spiritual involvement, to move on. So it's very, very, very strong. And this really is tied to the fact that they were both at a point where they were accepting of the help and they wanted the help, which is one of those stipulations to have a team help you. So the key lessons from Luciana and Amaro are pretty straightforward, I think. Emotional attachment can become a spiritual obstacle. How many of you have faced an emotional attachment that was an obstacle? I spent 7 years in one. I don't want to talk about it. Right? But it was a learning experience, right? And the more I study Spiritism, the more I understand those points in my life where I was low and what kept me in those low points. I joke with my dad. It's not a joke. It's pretty true. I tell him the older I am, the smarter he is. He loves it, right? Because I didn't listen to him when I was a kid. If I did, I wouldn't have taken so long to have some of these understandings. But the point here is when these emotional attachments turn into obsession and codependence, it just holds you back. It brings you down. And if we really love each other, right, it's going to respect this spiritual freedom. We should let these people go, right? It's time for them to move on. It's time for us to move on. And the healing comes from accepting that and accepting the impermanence. And that's how we continue our growth. I don't think there's much more to say there. Just those ties that cling us to the painful part of the separation or the painful part of attraction. They're just bad. They slow us down. They hold the other person down. So the big lesson here is try not to let these emotional attachments hold you back. Andre Luis shares some insights after this story, after these stories as well. And the big ones here, I've listed here. Each soul's experience reflects their choices. There's a book that I just happened to pick up by chance in graduate school. Just like us, we have that library where you can borrow a book. In one of our study rooms, they had this bookshelf, and this little tiny book, and it fascinated me because it was so small. I pulled it out, and the name of the book was The Precious Present, and it was all about living in the present moment. And if you think about it, our reality today is the consequence of the choices we've made previously. The choices I'm making today are going to lead to the consequences of tomorrow. So our experience truly reflects the choices that we've made, including not making a choice. How often do we get stuck, right? We're torn. What to do? Well, that's a choice, right? And there's consequences to that. Good intentions are not enough. Don't get me wrong, they're better than bad intentions, right? But good intentions hopefully spur us to good actions. I love, there's a book called Conversations with God that I read years ago. Thoughts, words, actions, right? So good intentions, right? If we're thinking good things, typically that'll lead to good words, which will lead to good actions, which lead to good habits, which lead to better character and morality. That's how I like to look at it, right? But intentions are not enough. We've got to put it into action. Daily practice and reform are essential. How many of us, I know I do this, I'm really good today, tomorrow, a fourth day, but man, I crash, right? I just can't seem to string every day together. That's okay, right? We're going to fail, we're going to fall. But if we get up every morning with good intentions and we really try, we're going to have more good days than bad days. And that's essential for our reform. Heaven is built within us, not found externally. That's profound. Just like we talked about being stuck in a lower zone, right? We're not there forever. There's not an eternal hell, if you will, and there's not this physical location called heaven. But it's that personal evolvement of going from that simple spirit that's lacking knowledge and experience of life after life, ultimately evolving to be a pure spirit. That is the coming from within us and growing. Emotional and spiritual maturity affect disincarnation. We've talked about that. Whatever state you're in as we leave this physical life definitely is going to impact that transition. Are we going to be, for those of you that have read Heaven and Hell, that's one of the books in the codification. Half of that book is stories from spirits that have passed, telling their story of their life, and more importantly, the time they spent recuperating, if you will, after a death. There's some examples in there where centuries have passed and they're stuck in the mud, if you will, and there's other stories where it wasn't so hard. However we leave this world emotionally and spiritually, it's going to impact the amount of time that we spend healing, if you will. The law of cause and effect governs all. I have a wonderful brother. He's a good guy, but back in the day, and to this day, we swear that he has a gray cloud over his head. If something bad is going to happen, it's going to happen to my brother. It's just his luck. That's how we used to talk about this. But now what I believe, I think what this is telling us is, for whatever reason, he's in these situations because of choices he's made. It's not that life isn't fair. It's not that he's got bad luck. He's living the consequences of choices that he made, like all of us. Make sense? Yeah, awesome. And then suffering can be a tool for purification and growth. How many of you thank God for your problems? I said, how many of us thank God for our problems? Do you? Good for you, man. I still have a hard time.
There is the yin and the yang.
Okay.
We've got to be grateful for both.
Sure.
And
I'm with you.
And that. one of the reasons why we have these lives is so God can experience us sheltered,
Okay.
held off, where in an omniscient condition, he can't see the separation. You can't see good and bad.
Okay.
The only one exists for you. But yes,
Good for you, man. Because I hurt my shoulder yesterday, and my wife and I were praying this morning, and I started to pray with, "Thank you for my pain," and I stopped. I said, "I'm not thankful for my pain." You know what I mean? I almost didn't go to work today. I mean, I took a pill. I took a muscle relaxant. Finally, I couldn't put my regular shirt on because I couldn't get my arm in the sleeve, and I really tried, man. Thank you, God, for my pain. As I stopped, and he's like, "I'm not thankful, man." What's that?
not there yet.
Yeah, not there yet. I have a lot of work to do. But the point here is the challenges that we face, whether it's monetary, whether it's love, whether it's physical pain, illness, disease, all of that is an opportunity to grow, right? You tell a story about your boss when you were a photographer and how hard it was until you prayed for him. And then all of a sudden you got the better spots, right? You changed that experience.
Well, I had to pray in Arabic.
Yeah, you had to pray in Arabic. That's right, because he was that. So, although I'm not there completely, I get it, right? The challenges I face are an opportunity for me to grow, and I need to embrace that. But I'm still trying. All right, we got what, 2 more hours? You with me? 3 more hours? All right. So, daily reflections. How do we prepare for our spiritual future? Any thoughts?
Live your life completely now.
Okay. Live in that precious present moment, right? Love, follow the example of Christ. Are we cultivating love? Are we cultivating forgiveness and humility? There's the Lord's Prayer, right? One of the meanings, or one of the pieces of that is about forgiving our trespasses, right? And it talks about before we pray, one of the instructions for praying is we should ask for forgiveness and forgive anyone we have qualms with, right? Issues with. So are we doing that? Are we praying for our enemies? Are we asking for forgiveness?
Well, if you think about forgive our trespasses as we forgive who trespasses against us, it's probably, it makes you think,
Yes.
am I really doing that? Because I'm asking for the same to happen to me.
So are we doing it selfishly? You always got to go there, man. No, I'm just kidding.
Normally you try to cheat, right?
That's right. Exactly. No, I didn't think about that. Yes, but you're right. Do our lives reflect our external values? If not, what can we do to promote change? And that's where the practical applications come in. All right. We're doing something today, right? It's a Thursday night, and I bet you there's some place where it's a lot more fun to be than listening to me talk, right? But you're here. You got in your car after work. You came here. You're listening. You're participating. We can pray daily. We can meditate daily. We can serve others silently and lovingly. It doesn't have to be showy. It doesn't have to be with money. Just helping our neighbor, right? We can study the gospel, the Spiritist doctrine, whatever you're into, right? It doesn't have to be a religion per se, but just study good stuff. And then engage in moral transformation by taking your thoughts, turning them into positive words, turning them into positive actions. Easy to say, yeah? Exactly. How many of us are going to go out and get cut off and tell them they're number one when we leave here, right? I've seen it happen. I'm guilty. I think the best way to talk about the practical applications is rather than all these long lists, just listen. Whether you are a Christian, an atheist, a Hindu, you're Jewish, whatever, right? If all we did was talk to you about the way Christ lived, right? Just not the religious aspect or the spiritual aspect, just the way he lived. Like I'm reading Matthew right now. Matthew's just full of all these wonderful parables and stories. The good that he did, right? The help that he did. So if you were to describe to somebody the way Jesus lived, and they had no knowledge of the guy, and you asked them the question, now, if we all live like that, would the world be a better place? There's no denying it, right? If we can just follow his example. He walked the earth and lived and showed us how to live, taught us how to live. And I think that's the best practical application that we can try to follow. So, I already told you this. I got ahead of myself. See, Peter, I messed up. But it probably doesn't hurt to repeat it, right? Right? He taught us through his living example. Love is the source and the center and destination of all realities. If we can focus our energy on love for others, love for ourselves, love for God, we're going to elevate our thoughts, and that's going to turn into better actions. So a closing thought here is to die is not enough. To be reborn in the greater life, it's essential to know how to die. And we talked about this. The way we live, the way we embrace every day, the way that we ultimately leave this earth is going to greatly impact our transition. So I'll leave you with that and maybe some parting questions, right? What story touched you the most? Anything stand out? Did you feel affinity or attraction to one of those characters more than the other? Are there personal lessons that you've drawn from this message? And you don't have to answer out loud, but what are you going to do differently when we leave here tonight? Is there anything here that we're going to work on? I'm going to work on trying to be more consistent with stringing better days together. Because when I mess up, it seemed to go one extreme to the other. So I have to do a better job of that. What practices can we embrace starting today? What can we do differently? What aren't we doing that we talked about that we could maybe start? So many possibilities, right? Any questions? Any thoughts before I say goodnight? I mean, I did a good job, yeah? No question?
Pretty much.
Hey, thank you for your time and attention. I appreciate you putting up with me. I appreciate the opportunity to share what I learned. And have a great evening. Thank you.